All right, so you've got a ton of notes on the Roman Empire here.
Yeah, it's a civilization that never fails to fascinate.
It's a lot to unpack, for sure.
Definitely. There are so many layers to Roman history, so many different threads to pull on.
Well, we're here to help you sort through it all.
Sounds good.
Your notes start with the end of the Roman Republic and the rise of the empire. This
S-
feels like a pretty pivotal moment, wouldn't you say?
it was a time of tremendous upheaval, really.
What were some of the key factors that led to that shift from republic to empire?
Well, you can't talk about the fall of the Republic without talking about Julius Caesar,
Right. He's a pretty iconic figure
to say the least, yeah. Caesar was a brilliant general, a shrewd politician.
and ambitious.
Oh, without a doubt. He had this vision of Rome as a powerful empire ruled by a single, all-powerful leader.
And that didn't sit well with everyone.
No, it did not.
Mhm.
The Roman Senate, they were wary of Caesar's ambitions, saw him as a threat to the Republic, to their own power.
So they decided to,
They decided to take matters into their own hands. In 44 BC, Caesar was assassinated on the floor of the Senate.
it's a pretty dramatic end.
It was a turning point in Roman history. Caesar's death didn't bring back the Republic like the senators had hoped.
It kind of had the opposite effect, right?
It unleashed a whole new wave of power struggles and civil wars. Out of that chaos, though, emerged a new leader. Caesar's great-nephew, Octavian, later known as Augustus.
Augustus. So he's the one who actually manages to establish the empire.
Exactly. Augustus was incredibly cunning. He learned from Caesar's mistakes, understood the importance of appearances.
What do you mean?
He knew he couldn't just declare himself emperor. The Romans, they still clung to the ideals of the Republic.
Even after all that?
Exactly, as part of their identity. So Augustus was very clever about how he consolidated his power.
So how did he pull it off? How did he manage to become emperor while still making it look like the republic was intact?
Well, he was a master of propaganda, for one thing. He portrayed himself as a restorer of peace and order after all the chaos of the civil wars.
Smart.
He also kept the Senate around, at least in name. He gave them the illusion of power, while he really held the reins.
It's like he wrote the playbook on political maneuvering.
In many ways, he did. In his reign, it ushered in an era known as the Pax Romana, a period of unprecedented peace and prosperity for the Roman world.
Pax Romana, Roman peace. It sounds almost too good to be true.
It was a remarkable period in Roman history. For about 200 years, the Roman Empire experienced relative stability, allowing for incredible cultural and economic growth.
200 years of peace? That's quite an accomplishment.
It is, and it's the testament to Augustus's skill as a ruler, his understanding of how to maintain power, how to keep the empire stable.
But even during times of peace and prosperity, I imagine there were still challenges, everyday realities that even the most powerful empire couldn't escape.
Oh, absolutely. And your notes, they delve into some of those less glamorous aspects of Roman life. We're talking about sanitation, or the lack thereof.
Okay, so give me the dirt on Roman hygiene.
Well, let's just say it was a far cry from what we're used to today. I can imagine. For example, imagine public restrooms equipped with rows of seats, but instead of individual stalls, it's just one big open space.
Oh, no.
And for cleaning, well, they had this thing called a tersorium.
Oh, what are you?
A tersorium basically was a sponge on a stick.
A sponge on a stick, as in everyone shared the same sponge.
You got it. Not exactly the most hygienic practice by today's standards.
No, not at all. I can't believe they didn't have, like, some kind of sanitation regulations back then. I mean, you think.
Well, they did have some ideas about hygiene, but they were different from ours. Like, they were big on using urine to clean things.
Wait, what? Urine?
Yeah, urine. Turns out it's actually a pretty good source of ammonia.
Ammonia, like what we clean with today.
Exactly. They used it to wash clothes, even to whiten teeth.
Okay, that is both ingenious and slightly horrifying.
The Romans, they were nothing if not resourceful.
I'll say. So we've covered sponges on sticks and urine as laundry detergent. What other fascinating tidbits about daily life in ancient Rome do you have in store for us?
Well, your notes also touch on Roman marriage customs, which were quite different from our own.
Oh, how so?
Well, for starters, girls were often married very young, often in their early teens, to men who were significantly older.
Wow, that's quite young.
It was a patriarchal society, and marriages were often seen as strategic alliances, ways to secure wealth, property, or political connections.
So not so much about love and romance then.
Not typically, no.
Yeah.
And then there's the issue of infant exposure.
Infant exposure, you mean?
Sadly, yes. In ancient Rome, it wasn't uncommon for unwanted infants, especially girls or infants born with disabilities, to be abandoned.
Abandoned, like left to fend for themselves.
Essentially, yes. It's a dark side of Roman history. But it's important to remember that these practices, while abhorrent to us today, were influenced by the social and economic realities of the time.
It's a good reminder that we can't judge the past solely by the standards of the present. But it's still,
Of course, it's a difficult subject to grapple with. And unfortunately, the harsh realities of Roman society didn't end there. Your notes also mention the institution of slavery, which was deeply entrenched in Roman life.
right, slavery. It's a dark chapter in human history, and the Roman Empire was no exception.
No, it wasn't. In fact, slavery was a cornerstone of the Roman economy. Slaves, they came from all over the empire, often as prisoners of war.
And what kind of work did they do?
Everything. They worked in the fields, in the mines, in households, even as gladiators in the arena. Their labor was essential to the functioning of Roman society.
It's hard to imagine a society built on such a system.
It is, but it's a part of Roman history that we can't ignore if we want to truly understand the civilization.
I agree. So we've talked about the rise of Augustus, the Pax Romana, and some of the more unsettling aspects of daily life in ancient Rome. What's next on our journey through the Roman Empire? So we've covered the transition from republic to empire, the Pax Romana, and even touched on some of the less glamorous realities of Roman life.
And believe me, we've only just scratched the surface.
Well, I'm ready to dig deeper. Your notes start to delve into the emperors who followed Augustus.
Ah, yes. The emperors, they ran the gamut.
What do you mean?
Some were brilliant leaders, some were utterly ruthless, and some were, well, let's just say a bit eccentric.
Sounds interesting. Where do we even start with this cast of characters?
Well, your notes highlight a few in particular. Let's see. Ah, yes, Caligula.
Caligula. Now, there's a name that's synonymous with, shall we say, excess?
To put it mildly, Caligula. He was emperor for just 4 years, but he certainly made an impression.
He's the one who supposedly appointed his horse as a senator.
That's the one. Now, whether it's entirely true or not, it's up for debate, but the fact that this story even exists says a lot about his reputation.
I can imagine. So he wasn't exactly known for his sound judgment?
Let's just say he wasn't exactly the model of a stable and rational leader. Extravagance, cruelty, paranoia, those were more his style.
It sounds like his reign was more chaos than Pax Romana.
You could say that. Then there's Nero, another emperor whose name has become shorthand for tyranny.
Ah, Nero. Didn't he play the fiddle while Rome burned?
That's the story, isn't it? Though historians still debate his role in the Great Fire of Rome in 64 CE, the image has stuck.
I can see why it's a powerful image.
Right. It's that kind of thing that cements a legacy. Regardless of whether he started the fire, Nero used the disaster to his advantage, seizing land, rebuilding parts of the city to his liking.
So, not exactly a benevolent ruler.
Not quite. But it's important to remember that not all Roman emperors were like Caligula or Nero. Your notes also mention some rulers who were genuinely admired and respected.
Well, that's a relief. Tell me more about some of the, shall we say, good emperors of Rome.
Gladly. Let's start with Trajan. He ruled from 98 to 117 CE and oversaw a period of significant expansion and prosperity.
Your notes mention that he had a real passion for building.
He did. Trajan's Column, still standing in Rome today, is a testament to that. But it wasn't just grand monuments. He built roads, aqueducts, bathhouses, harbors infrastructure that benefited the entire empire.
So he understood that a strong empire needs a solid foundation.
Exactly. And then you have his successor, Hadrian.
Hadrian, he's the one with the wall, right?
You got it. Hadrian's Wall, stretching across northern England, is one of the most iconic symbols of the Roman Empire.
It must have been an incredible feat of engineering, building something like that.
Oh, absolutely. It took thousands of men, years of labor, and it was a clear message to those living beyond the wall. This is the edge of the Roman world.
Talk about a statement. So we've got Trajan the builder, Hadrian the defender. Who else deserves a place in this good emperor hall of fame?
Well, we can't forget about Marcus Aurelius. He ruled in the 2nd century CE and was a true philosopher king.
A philosopher king. Now that's an interesting combination.
Right, he was a student of Stoicism, and his writings on self-control, duty, and virtue are still studied today.
It's incredible to think about someone grappling with the immense pressures of ruling an empire while also finding the time to reflect on philosophical ideas. It makes you wonder if those philosophical beliefs influenced his leadership.
It's a question historians still debate. But it's clear that Marcus Aurelius took his role as emperor very seriously, always striving to rule with justice and wisdom.
It sounds like he really tried to live up to his ideals, even in the face of some pretty tough challenges. Speaking of challenges, your notes abruptly shift gears from the grandeur of emperors and their reigns to something entirely different. The Colosseum. It feels like such a powerful symbol of ancient Rome.
It is. The Colosseum, with its gladiatorial combats, its mock-sea battles, its public executions, it's a stark reminder of the brutal realities of entertainment in the Roman world.
It's both fascinating and disturbing. I can't even imagine what it must have been like to be in that arena, to witness that kind of violence firsthand.
It's hard for us to fathom today, isn't it? But it was a huge part of Roman culture, a way for the emperors to appease the masses, to demonstrate their power, and, some argue, to distract from other problems facing the empire.
It's a reminder that entertainment can serve many purposes, some more noble than others.
Definitely. And the Colosseum, still standing today, a physical reminder of the complexities of the past, of the darkness that can exist even in the most celebrated of civilizations.
It's a sobering thought. And speaking of sobering thoughts, your notes take us next to the fall of the Roman Empire, a topic that's fascinated historians for centuries. Okay, so before we dive into the fall of the Roman Empire, I have to ask expert speaker.
Yeah,
Yeah, we've talked a lot about the Roman Empire, singular expert speaker.
right.
But we've also talked about how the Eastern Roman Empire continued on for centuries after the Western Roman Empire fell, expert speaker. That's right. So how do historians reconcile those two narratives?
It's a great question. For a long time, historians really focused on the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 CE.
Right, that's kind of the traditional narrative, isn't it?
It is. But more and more, we're recognizing that it's not as simple as just saying Rome fell.
Because the Eastern Roman Empire, what we often call the Byzantine Empire, it carried on the torch of Roman culture and tradition for centuries.
Exactly. They saw themselves as heirs to Rome, and in many ways they were. They preserved Roman law, Roman art, and literature.
So it's like this fascinating split in the story of Rome, where one half declines and falls, while the other adapts and thrives for another 1,000 years.
It's a reminder that empires and civilizations, they're not always monolithic. They evolve, they splinter, and sometimes they find ways to endure, even in the face of tremendous change.
It makes you wonder how different our understanding of history would be if the Byzantine Empire had been the one to endure and the Western Roman Empire the one that faded away.
It's an interesting thought experiment, isn't it? But it speaks to the power of perspective, of how we choose to tell the stories of the past.
Absolutely. So with that in mind, how do we even begin to sum up the legacy of a civilization as vast and influential as the Roman Empire? Where do we even start?
It's a daunting task, for sure. But I think we can start by looking at the tangible and intangible ways the Romans shaped the world around them.
Okay, so give me an example of a tangible legacy of Rome.
Their infrastructure, their roads, aqueducts, sewage systems, these were incredible feats of engineering that improved the lives of millions and left a lasting mark on the landscape.
Yeah, you can still see Roman roads and aqueducts in many parts of Europe. It's incredible to think about the skill and ingenuity it took to build those structures and how they're still standing centuries later.
They really were master builders. They understood that infrastructure wasn't just about practicality. It was about connecting the empire, projecting power, and leaving a lasting legacy.
It's interesting how those structures, those physical remnants of a bygone era, can still inspire awe and wonder today.
They connect us to the past in a very visceral way. But then there are the intangible legacies, like Roman law.
Right, we touched on this earlier. The Roman legal system, it wasn't perfect, but it had a huge impact on the development of Western law.
Huge is an understatement. Principles like innocent until proven guilty, the idea that justice should be based on a written code of law, those ideas have roots in ancient Rome.
And those ideas, they're still with us today, shaping our legal systems, our sense of justice.
Absolutely. And then there's the legacy of Latin. Even though it's not a widely spoken language anymore, its influence is everywhere.
It's like the DNA of so many modern languages.
Yeah.
Spanish, French, Italian, even English, they've all been shaped by Latin in some way.
Exactly. And it's not just the words themselves, it's the grammar, the syntax, the way we structure our thoughts.
It's amazing to think that a language spoken by a civilization that existed centuries ago can still have such a profound influence on how we communicate today. And it's not just language, right? There are also these fascinating parallels between ancient Rome and the founding of the United States.
Oh, absolutely. The founding fathers, they were students of classical history, and they saw in the Roman Republic, especially in its early days, a model for their own government.
So those ideas about democracy, representative government, checks and balances, they were influenced, at least in part, by the Roman experience.
Without a doubt. And it's not just in the structure of the government. It's in the architecture of our public buildings, in our symbols, even in our language.
It really is remarkable, isn't it? The way that history, even ancient history, continues to echo through the ages, shaping who we are and how we see the world.
It's a reminder that the past is never truly past. It's always with us, influencing the present and shaping the future.
That's a great note to end on. To our listeners, we hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the Roman Empire. It's a civilization full of complexities, contradictions, and enduring legacies.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
We have, but hopefully this has given you a taste of the Roman world, its triumph, its tragedies, and its lasting impact on Western civilization. Until next time.